Guys, your homework this weekend was solving the quadratic with the quadratic formula. So the first thing obviously you have to have memorized is the quadratic formula. So we memorized it with that song Pop Goes the Weasel. So the way that you can do it is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Obviously I do not have a good singing voice. So here we go. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to write the formula. That's step 1. Step 2 is we're going to label. Quadratics in standard form are ax squared plus bx plus c. So this is our a, this is our b, this is our c. All we're going to do is we're going to rewrite this formula, but instead of writing the letters, I'm going to write parentheses. And the reason we're going to write parentheses is so that we do not mess up the symbols. I do not want us to make mistakes when we're talking about negatives versus subtraction. They're two different things, okay? So if you noticed, instead of a B, I put a parentheses. Instead of a B, I put a parentheses. Instead of an A, I put a parentheses. Instead of a C, I put a parentheses. Instead of an A, I put a parentheses. All I'm going to do is I'm going to plug them in. So if there's nothing in front of X, it's like a 1's there, okay? So every time I see an A, which was here and here, I'm going to plug in a negative 1. So negative 1, negative 1. Every time I see a B, which is here and here, I'm going to plug in a negative 12. And this is why those parentheses come in handy. This is a negative. This is a negative. I don't want you to get confused. They're not the same symbol. This negative is outside. This negative goes with that 12. Okay? So now C gets plugged in where C goes, so that goes at the very end. And this is why those parentheses come in handy, because it helps us keep everything straight. So, I'm just going to work it out. 2 negatives would make it a positive 12, plus or minus the square root. Negative 12 squared is saying negative 12 times negative 12. 2 negatives would make a positive, and 12 times 12 is 144. Okay, so we did that. We did that. Now we're going to have a negative 4 times a negative 1. Again, 2 negatives would make a positive. 4 times 1 is 4. And we're going to bring this times negative 18 down. Okay? All over 2 times negative 1. Well, a positive times a negative is a negative. 2 times 1 is 2. So we're getting there. We're not finished yet. But we did everything in here, so now we've kind of moved down here. So we're going to keep going. This 12 stays 12. Plus or minus stays the same. Square root. So now I have 144 plus 4 times negative 18. This has to be done because multiplication comes before addition. So I can just go off to the side and say negative 18 times 4. 8 times 4 is 32. Put down my 2, carry my 3. 1 times 4 is 4. Plus 3 is 7. A negative times a positive is a negative. So now I have 72. So that 144 stays. That minus 72 comes over here. Divided by that negative 2 just stays the same. So again, I'm almost done, but I'm not finished yet, because right here I can still subtract. So I just go off to the side. 144 minus 72. I'm going to subtract. I'm going to get 72. So now I'm left with 12 plus or minus the square root of 72 over negative 2. That's my answer. This is good enough. We are good to go for now. We are only in Algebra 1. We are not in Algebra 2. So there is not a square root of 72 because 72 is not a perfect square. So everything would stay like that, and that is our answer. All right, let's do example 2. Now if we notice example 2, I need it in standard form, which says ax squared plus bx plus c, but I'm not in that form. So it's super easy. I just have to get everything equal to 0. So I can draw my little line. How do you get rid of a 4x that's positive? Well, you subtract it on both sides. Cancels. So now I have 5x squared plus 3x equals 3. Well, I still am not equal to 0. I got to get rid of that 3. So let's subtract 3 here. Let's subtract 3 over here. Cancels. So I'm going to rewrite my problem. I have 5x squared plus 3x minus 3 equals 0. So this I don't have to worry about anymore. I'm kind of done with it. Here, I'm going to write that formula again. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now I'm going to go ahead and label A, B, C. So again, I'm going to write my parentheses for my formula. So here we go. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And again, I'm writing the parentheses so I do not mess up the symbols. And all I'm going to do is plug them in. So these are both b's, so I'm going to plug in that 3. These are both a's, so I'm going to plug in that 5. This is the c, so I'm going to plug in the c. And then I'm just going to work it out. Negative 3 would be negative 3. Plus or minus the square root. 3 squared is not 3 times 2. It's 3 times 3, which is 9. Done. Done. Negative times a positive is a negative. 4 times 5 is 20. Bring down that negative 3. All over 2 times 5 is 10. So now I'm going to keep going because I'm not finished. Again, I'm not going to subtract first because I have to do orders of operation. Parentheses mean to multiply. So negative 3 stays the same. Plus or minus stays the same. Square root stays the same. 9 stays the same. I have negative 20 times negative 3. 2 negatives make a positive. 20 times 3 is 60 over 10. Again, I'm not finished because I can add these. So now I have negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 69 over 10. And that would be my answer because 69 is not a perfect square, so I am good to go. All right, let's look at the last one. What do you notice about the last one that's different? This one looks like those FOIL problems that we did. So when you have a problem like this, you can still solve it. You just might have to do a couple of extra steps. So the first extra step that you're going to have to do is we are going to have to FOIL this. So we put a 1 behind each x, and then we multiply. x1 times x1 gives us x squared. x1 times 2 gives me a positive 2x. 6 times x gives me 6x. And 6 times 2 gives me 12 equals 14. So now, like always, after I distribute, this is distributed property, also FOIL, we're going to combine these things because they can be combined. So now I have x squared. 2 plus 6 is 8x plus 12 equals 14. But I'm not done yet because I need this equal to 0. So I can still get rid of this. How I can get rid of this is by subtracting 14 here, subtracting 14 here, cancel, and I would be left with x squared plus 8x minus 2 equals 0. So that's how you can factor it. After that, we would use quadratic formula again. So here we go. A, B, C. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Alright, but instead, of course, we're going to use our parentheses. So, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay? So we're going to plug them in again. Our a, there's nothing in front of x. That means there's a 1. So our a would get a 1. A b would get our 8s. And our c would get a negative 2. So now we're going to work them out. Negative 8 stays negative 8. Plus or minus the square root. 8 squared is not 8 times 2. It is 8 times 8. 8 times 8 is 64. So done, done. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. And then we're going to bring down that negative 2. All over 2 times 1, which is 2. So everything here is done. Now we're here. Again, we're not finished. We have to multiply before we add or subtract. So negative 8 stays, plus or minus stays, square root stays, 64 stays, over 2 stays. Now all I'm doing is negative 4 times negative 2. 2 negatives make a positive, and 4 times 2 is 8. Still not finished because I can add these together very easily. So finally, negative 8 stays, plus or minus stays, square root stays, 2 stays. All I'm doing is adding 64 plus 8, which is 72. And we finally have our answer. All right, guys, I hope that helps with quadratics. See you later.